Cold brewing can be a great way to enjoy green teas in the summertime, but is the flavor as good as when you brew them hot? In this video, we're going to be preparing the same tea, both as a cold brew and as a hot brew, to see how the flavor changes. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. We have hundreds of videos on all sorts of topics related to Japanese green tea, but for this one, we'll focus on cold brewing. Let's get started. Okay, so what I have here is the Gyokuro Karigane from Mr. Sakamoto. I cold brewed some this morning actually. I put it in 3 hours ago. That's, to me at least, like the optimal time for a cold brew. And I'm going to compare it with a hot brewed tea. So what I'm going to do here is just show you the leaves. So Karigane is a shaded stem tea. So what separates it from a normal kukicha, for example, is that it comes from shaded tea plants. So the tea plants are covered with a type of netting called kabuse leading up to the harvest. This one, for example, 3 weeks leading up to the harvest. And what that does is it stops the production of catechins, which are the more bitter components of the tea. So you'll notice here, like, it's got some light yellow stems, but it's also got some dark green leaves. So this is something that you wouldn't find with a normal kukicha stem tea, for example. So this makes the tea a little bit sweeter, a little bit smoother. You may get some fruitiness from the tea as well. But what I want to demonstrate here is how the flavor changes depending on how you brew it. So I'm going to go ahead and put 5 grams, more or less, into this teapot. Then I'm just going to pour in 60 degrees Celsius water. Using about between 150 and 200 milliliters for this. And steeping time of about 1 minute. I mentioned before briefly about the catechins, and these are the bitter components of the tea, and it's reduced when you shade the tea plant before the harvest. So if a farmer wants to make a smoother, sweeter tea, they'll actually shade the tea plant to reduce the amount of catechins that are produced. But if you, the tea brewer, want to reduce the amount of catechins in your tea, what you can do is actually use cooler water. So cold brewing is a great way to enjoy tea in the summertime, but it also can really change the flavor profile of the tea, because when you use cooler water over a longer brewing time, you're actually extracting less of these catechins. So you're going to get less of this bite to the tea. It's going to be a little bit smoother and a little bit sweeter. So I'm just going to go pour this one out, pour this cold brew out. And then I'm going to pour the hot brew out. Wow, that's almost the exact same amount of water. I did not plan that. So, just go ahead and compare the color. This one is actually richer in color, the cold brew, and that's likely just because it's been in for longer, so it's had a chance to absorb more. And this one, you see some more particulates kind of floating around. But let's go ahead and get a taste. The warm brew tea it's sweet. It's got some of this kind of straw characteristic, late summer grass. I do get a little bit of that sweet melon note that I like in this Karigane. Try the cold brew. Oh wow. This is really, really good. It's got that sweetness to it. It's got that kind of cantaloupe, melon, cucumber water sort of flavor to it, which is really refreshing. But then it also has this incredible complex floral characteristic to it. So there's a lot of dimension with this tea. It's really refreshing. Something that would really kind of like quench your thirst, I would say. This one's good, but it definitely goes more into that kind of straw note, which you might like. But when it comes to kind of a refreshing summer tea. I definitely like more of the fruitiness, more of this cucumber note, more of this kind of this floral dimension to the tea. Still good though. This might be nice in the cold morning. You know, in the mornings are a little bit chillier in the spring or the summer, and then this you kind of drink throughout the day. It's really good. So this would likely have more caffeine because I'm using warmer water. This would likely have less caffeine because I'm using cooler water. So basically what's happening here, I can show you these leaves. Catechins are, as I mentioned before, the bitter parts of the tea leaf, but luckily for us, they're extracted at a hotter temperature. So you can actually control how much is extracted by the brewing temperature that you use. And this is why with a tea like gyokuro, we recommend using a lower temperature. But even at 60 degrees Celsius, you can still extract some of the catechins. So the cold brew or room temperature brew is going to be a lot smoother and a lot sweeter. If I were to raise the temperature up to 70 degrees Celsius, the difference would be even more extreme. You get even more bitterness with this tea versus this one. But the trick is with cold brewing, one of the downside is that it's going to have less like raw power to it. So I sometimes like to play around with using a little bit more leaves, a little bit less water, you know, kind of bumping up that leaf to water ratio to get a little more of a concentrated tea. Even if that means I get less tea overall, it's worth it for me to have something that's so rich and flavorful. I don't really need a whole lot when it has so much flavor to it. The other thing is make sure you give it enough time. I think 1 hour you can get some flavor. Overnight is often too much. I think 3 hours is kind of in that sweet spot where you get a lot of flavor, but it's not too overpowering. And of course, with enough time, you're going to start extracting some of the bitterness. So you don't want to let it brew too long. So what I did this morning is I had my hot teas as soon as I woke up, and then I put this cold brew in. Went for a bike ride, came back, and I have this nice, refreshing cold brew tea to enjoy when I get home. So if you kind of plan this out a little bit, it's not that inconvenient. You have your hot teas, and then you brew your cold tea, and then you can enjoy it later on in the day as the temperature gets a little bit warmer. So I hope you all enjoyed this little demonstration of cold brewed green tea. The Karigane, I have to say, is probably one of the best teas for cold brew. The Shizuku Sencha, Karigane Sakamoto, and Fukumushi Yamaga are kind of our three go-to cold brew teas. So if you would like to pick this one up, you can find it at neoteas.com. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful. Definitely try some cold brew teas if you get a chance. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But until then, we'll see you next time.